For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Franz Cronier, the CEO of the South African Institute of Race Relations, has suggested that the deaths of babies in Bloemhof from contaminated water are directly related to affirmative action. What is your view on that?
I read this article, well, it's got more than one article. I read the statement and then there was an article in City Press, and it was rather disturbing. The Institute of Race Relations has been going for a long time, and I have been reading their literature since I was a university student, although now it's become rather unaffordable in many respects to subscribe to the annual survey. However, I do follow their work, and it has a record for producing objective data. However, in the last few decades, this data collection has coexisted with interventions of a political kind related to trying or attempting, in my view, to negate what I felt were legitimate struggles, to give revisions of the way in which the KwaZulu-Natal war between Inkatha and the ANC-UDF occurred, and to demonize mass struggle. Now, obviously, when I say that they are trying to revise a view on that, I've got my own stand, and it's legitimate to do this. However, once you enter into the fray in the way that they have done, it's hard to claim that you're detached above positions and all of that. Now, this statement of Cronier is extremely provocative, because he used this phrase, the tyranny of political correctness. Now, that's a variation of the tyranny of the majority. It implies that people who have independent minds are being tyrannized by majority into doing what is politically correct. Now, so-called political correctness is the idea that if you stand out from the herd and express an individual opinion, you'll feel the weight of so-called political correctness and the weight of the majority, and the value of your opinion will not be correctly evaluated on its merits. Now, that to me is rhetoric. It's not really an argument. And he doesn't demonstrate a connection between affirmative action and the deaths of babies in Bloemhof. Affirmative action is not something applied only in business. Creating a middle class elite is what he is dealing with, who act as gatekeepers to keep out people who on merit should get jobs, in his view. Affirmative action is meant to redress historical disabilities, where whiteness was a qualification above merit in many cases. After the 1922 strike, white miners' strike in South Africa, they started to make a deal whereby whites were preferred for jobs, and in a sense you were subsidized for whiteness. You were paid more insofar as you were a white person, and on the other side, on the mines particularly, the wages of black miners remained more or less the same from about 1912 to the 1960s. Francis Wilson showed this a long time ago. So what one has to understand is that opportunities for education, opportunities for jobs, irrespective of skills, were denied to black people, and remedies had to be provided both for a lack of opportunities and for lack of opportunities, for example, inferior schools, but also for people who were excluded because gatekeeping, which he refers to, kept black people out of jobs which they merited. Now, one of the things that he fastens onto is that people without experience are getting jobs. Now, they may have the formal qualifications, but they don't have the experience. Now, one of the problems in a society as racist as South Africa does remain in many respects is that it's very hard for black people to get the same experience as white people get. For example, at the bar, many people are complaining that black people are appointed as judges and they don't get a lot of experience, don't have a lot of experience. Now, to get experience means that a firm of attorneys has to brief you to appear in a case, or a senior counsel has to choose a junior counsel who is black to give that person experience. Now, what I understand from the bar is that white advocates tend to get most of the briefs, and white advocates tend to choose white as their juniors. So the way in which black people get experience is on the job, whether it's in being an advocate or in other respects. I'm not suggesting that all advocates operate this way, and all attorneys' firms, I'm suggesting, don't only brief whites, but that is what many people experience, and the same is the case in terms of opportunities to perform other jobs. So when Franz Cronier speaks about experience, he's actually negating the fact that race remains a factor in acquiring experience. But I would argue that black people have some experiences which white people don't have that in some ways should be factored into merit. For example, if you are a sociology lecturer, many of your students may have had to leave home at 5 o'clock in the morning and come on taxis that were unreliable, arrive in class tired. However, the experience that they have in their lives may not yet appear in the sociology books that the professors have skilled themselves in. Even though many of these professors have done field work, every single student has a unique experience, and the experience of the black students is in fact very different. And that is something from which a teacher who is prepared to listen may well learn. I know I have learned things that I didn't know as a result of questions that have been put to me by students. So the problem I have with the Franz Cronier article is also that he conflates black economic empowerment and affirmative action, and that a small elite, he says, have cornered access to wealth and they are gatekeepers against everyone else. And I think what he's failing to do is to take into account other factors that may have caused the Bloemhof death.
Now, Sipokazi Magadla and Nikiwe Bakicha have both attacked Cronier, sort of indicating the historical reasons for affirmative action. What do you think of their responses?
I agree with their responses. I should have mentioned that affirmative action is also applied to women, although white women have been primary beneficiaries amongst women. I agree with them, but I would add something else. Bloemhof is one of a number of municipalities where there have been allegations of corruption. And corruption is colorblind. However, in these municipalities, most of the mayors will be black. And it's not affirmative, it's a separate question from affirmative action. Why is it that we've created a situation? Why is it that government, irrespective of the constitution, have created a culture? The ANC has encouraged a culture where acquiring office is seen as a way of acquiring wealth. So we may well find, as was the case in Madibeng, that the dirty water or the lack of access to clean water resulted from the way in which tenders were managed, the way in which the process of providing constitutional duties was managed. And that to me is a distinct question from affirmative action. We need to understand how patronage works and how corruption works. So I agree that babies have died as a result of wrongdoing, irregularities. But affirmative action is a constitutional right and it's a quite separate thing from patronage and corruption. Thank you.
Thank you for your insight. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking about politics in South Africa.